Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Oh, blessed is he who hides in him. Oh, fear the Lord, all of you saints. He'll give you everything. He'll give you everything. Magnify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name together. Glorify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name forever. Let us bless the Lord every day and night. Never-ending praise, may our incense rise. Let us bless the
Praise
Lord,
the Lord
every day and
all
night.
you servants.
Never-ending
Praise the
praise,
name
may
of the
our incense rise.
Lord.
Let us bless the
Praise the
Lord,
Lord,
every day and
all
night.
you servants.
Never-ending
Praise the
praise,
name
may
of the
our
Lord.
incense rise. Bless the Lord, my soul, every day and night. Never-ending praise, may our incense rise. Bless the Lord, my soul, every day and night. Never-ending praise, may our incense rise. Magnify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name together. Glorify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name forever. Magnify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name together. Glorify the Lord with me. Come exalt his name forever. You were despised, you were rejected, Lord, those who passed by, even averted their gaze from the sight. Such was the suffering you bore for us. Led like a lamb to the slaughter, you spoke not a word, but chose to be silent, though you did no wrong, nor was deceitfulness found in you. Yet by your wounds our salvation has come, yet by your suffering our freedom is won. For God has highly exalted your name, he has enthroned you on high. Jesus, the name above all names. God has highly exalted your name, he has enthroned you on high. Jesus, the name above all names. You were despised, you were rejected, Lord, those who passed by, even averted their gaze from the sight. Such was the suffering you bore for us. Led like a lamb to the slaughter, you spoke not a word, but chose to be silent, though you did no wrong, nor was deceitfulness found in you. Yet by your wounds our salvation has come, yet by your suffering our freedom is won. For God has highly exalted your name, he has enthroned you on high. He has enthroned you on high. Jesus, the name above all names. You were despised, you were rejected, Lord. Those who passed by even averted their gaze from the sight. Such was the suffering you bore for us. Hear the holy roar of God resound.
Hear the holy roar of God resound.
Watch the waters part before us now.
Watch the waters part before us now.
Come and see what He has done for us. Tell the world of His great love. Our God is a God who saves. Our God is a God who saves. Let God arise. Let God arise. Our God reigns now and forever. He reigns now and forever. Arise. Let God arise. Our God reigns now and forever. He reigns now and forever. His enemies will run for sure.
His enemies will run for sure.
The church will stand, she will endure.
The church will stand, she will endure.
He holds the keys of life, our Lord. Death has no sting, no final word. Our God is a God who saves. Our God is a God who saves. Let God arise. Let God arise. Our God reigns now and forever. He reigns now and forever. Arise. Let God arise. Our God reigns now and forever. He reigns now and forever. Our God is a God who saves. 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 Let God arise. Let God arise. Our God reigns now and forever. He reigns now and forever. Arise. Let God arise. Our God reigns now and forever. He reigns now and forever. Let God arise. Precious cornerstone, sure foundation, you are faithful to the end. We are waiting on you, Jesus. We believe you're all to us. Only Son of God, sent from heaven, hope and mercy at the cross. You are everything, you're the promise. Jesus, you are all to us. Let the glory of your name be the passion of the church. Let the righteousness of God be a holy flame that burns. Let the saving love of Christ be the measure of our lives. We believe you're all to us. When this passing world is Let the righteousness of God be a holy flame that burns. Let the saving love of Christ be the measure of our lives. We believe you're all.
Well, I'm glad you're back. I mean, I hate that you're.
What? You made it to 25? Yes. We're 25 and 6 today. Okay, it is time for us to begin. If you have your Bibles, we'll be turning to Acts chapter 25. Acts chapter 25, Paul is in this series of trials and meetings before the leaders of the Roman people. We've already seen his trials before Felix, and Festus comes on at the end of chapter 24 and will be the new tribune or governor of the land, the procurator. And so he is meeting before Festus. Do you remember what Felix said in response to Paul when Paul preached to him the gospel? Chapter 24. What?
Talk to him again later.
Yes, come back at another time. And so he's putting off salvation. Felix, or Festus, on the other hand, whenever Paul comes and gives his defense, he asks Paul a question. He says, "Do you wish to go up to Jerusalem and there be tried on these charges before me?" In other words, he's trying to pass the buck of salvation. Let's go do this in Jerusalem. Let's take it out of Roman hands and put it in the Jewish hands and see how things go, because these are matters concerning your laws. Well, Paul's a Roman citizen, and so he uses that Roman citizenship again to have the privilege of going before Caesar. And that's the last thing we looked at last week in verse 11 when he said, "I appeal to Caesar." In verse 12, Festus, when he had conferred with his council, answered, "To Caesar you have appealed, to Caesar you shall go." And so Paul is now going to make his trip, or start his journey, we might say, toward Rome. Before we get there, though, Agrippa, King Agrippa is going to come, and he also wants to know about the affairs of Paul, so he gets with Festus. When some days had passed, Agrippa the king and Bernice arrived at Caesarea. Bernice is his wife, and this would be Agrippa the second. We're not talking about the great king. We're talking about Agrippa the second instead of Agrippa the great. He and his wife Bernice arrive at Caesarea and greeted Festus. This is kind of a goodwill tour. From a higher up to a lower down, check with him, make sure things are going well with Festus. And as they stayed there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, "There's a man, a prisoner, left by Felix." So now it's kind of interesting. We have all three of these men, Festus, Felix, and Agrippa, mentioned in just the first these couple of verses here. "And when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews laid out their case against him, asking for a sentence of condemnation against him." Remember, there's no question about what the Jews want. They want Paul dead, right? They have never wavered from that. They have never once stopped and taken assessment of what their attitude is toward Paul, what Paul is actually deserving of, what he's actually guilty of. In their mind, they have already tried him, they have convicted him, and in their hearts, they have already executed him. And now it's just a matter of the Romans to catch up with him. So they want condemnation. Festus says, "I answered them that it was not the custom of the Romans to give up anyone before the accused met with the accusers face to face, an opportunity to make defense concerning the charge laid against him." And so I said, I can't just take your side of the story. That's not Roman custom. There are a lot of what we would call freedoms and liberties and protections in our laws today that were established by the Roman Empire. And one of them is that opportunity to face your accuser. Now, in modern times, we're starting to draw back from that a little bit, but there was a right to face your accuser and to give your own defense. And in some cases, it might seem or it seems good to maybe not let the accuser and the accused to go face to face. I think of years ago, I was on a grand jury, and there was a young lady. She was about 13 years old, and she had been molested. They didn't want her to face her accuser face to face. They wanted her. They taped her video, and then they were, well, you can understand why a 13-year-old would have been intimidated in the presence of the one. So we can understand there might be some mitigating circumstances to that. But generally speaking, we allow the accused and the accuser to meet face to face and give the one who's being accused of something the opportunity to give his defense. So when they came together. Came together here, I made no delay, but on the next day, took my seat on the tribunal and ordered the man to be brought. And so, if you'll recall, he had stayed in Jerusalem for a few more days, and then he invited them. He said, if you want to come up and make accusation against him, you can do that. In other words, we're going to keep it in the Roman court system. I'm not just going to turn this man over to you. I think probably Festus and Felix, too, recognized that there was more of a bloodlust in their words than there was a legal matter to deal with. And so he's not just going to turn them over. So we brought them over. They came with me. I sat on we made it official. When the accuser stood up, they brought no charge in his case of such evils as I suppose. In other words, nothing they brought up was evil or contrary to Roman law. He didn't break any laws that way. Rather, they had certain points of dispute with him about their own religion, about a certain Jesus who was dead, but whom Paul asserted to be alive. Now remember, Paul keeps saying, it's because of the resurrection that I'm here. Because of the resurrection, I'm here. Festus recognizes that. Being at a loss how to investigate these questions, I asked whether he wanted to go to Jerusalem and be tried regarding them. But when Paul had appealed to be kept in custody for the decision of the emperor, I ordered him to be held until I could send him to Caesar. And then Agrippa said to Festus, I would like to hear the man myself. Tomorrow, said he, and you will hear him. So now we're getting Agrippa involved. Agrippa is he's a king. He has ties to Rome, but he also has some ties back to the Jews, distant relatives through Edom. He is Idumean, and so there's some distant ties that way. So he understands the ins and outs, as it were, of the Jewish people. He's lived with them. He has family that are connected to them. He's probably more understanding of the Jewish ways than even Festus is. Now remember, Festus is a Roman official. He is sent in to be the procurator in this region for a short time, just as Felix was a short time. He has not grown up around them. Judaism is something very foreign to these Roman officials. Agrippa, on the other hand, has been here a long time. His family has grown up around the Jews. He is familiar with their ways and their customs. And so he says, I would like to hear. So on the next day, I love this, Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp. Great pomp. When we graduate with pomp and circumstance, right? That's the tune that plays at most graduations. Pomp and circumstance. Fantasia. That's actually the Greek word here, fantasia. And when I think of Fantasia, I think of Mickey Mouse directing the waves, right? It was big, it was magnificent. The orchestra is playing the colors and the lights, and it was big. Well, that's what happens when the king comes in. It's no longer just a trial. It is now an opportunity for him to show his position, to show his authority, to let the people see him. You can almost see him and Bernice walking in, in a very regal manner, with great pomp. And the problem with pomp is that it takes the attention away from the truth. No matter where you go, that's what happens when pomp is entered into the situation. Oftentimes any other purpose is minimized. And that's what's happening here. So with great pomp, they entered in the audience hall with the military tribunes and the prominent men of the city. Now all of a sudden everyone wants to see what's going on with Paul, because Agrippa wants to see. Do we sometimes do the same thing with leaders today? Do we we may not believe or care anything about them, but because of their status, because of their leader, because of their status and their authority, we want to maybe follow or listen. Back in the day when I used to watch MTV, back when they used to show music videos. There was a band would be up there, and he's, the lead singer's got a T-shirt on, right? And then, what happens is sales of that T-shirt skyrocket because he wore that in that video. Or you go to a concert, and the drummer's wearing this shirt, and everyone sees it, and then the sales of that T-shirt. We don't like to think it's true, but it is. We follow people who have status, who have pomp. And so these people are following Agrippa into the courtroom, into the audience hall with Agrippa to hear what Paul has to say. And Festus brings in, it says, Paul is brought in. Festus said, King Agrippa and all who are present with us, you see this man about whom the whole Jewish people petitioned me, both in Jerusalem and here, shouting that he ought not to live any longer. Festus even recognizes this is a different crowd than the last time. Right? We've got more people here, more interest in this case because Agrippa has shown interest in this case. People want to know about it. And he says, the whole Jewish people. Well, it's just like when the Jewish leaders were looking at John and they said, all Judea has gone out to be baptized of him. Well, it wasn't really all of Judea, but there was a significant number of Judean Jews that were following John. I don't think it was necessarily the whole Jewish people, because I don't think that Festus even talked to all the Jewish people. But there is a significant number, a vocal number, and of this number, many are leaders, right? That's kind of how we do it. We don't talk directly to the people, right? We have leaders that are go-betweens or mediators between the higher-ups and the lowest down, right? We have these mediators. The Jewish leaders, the Pharisees, the Sadducean council, not Sadducean, the Sanhedrin council. These are the leaders that the Romans would have looked to get the pulse of the people, because the kings and Romans they're not going to go door to door to find out how every individual Jew feels about this situation. They're going to go to the leaders, and the leaders seem pretty consolidated on this idea that Paul needs to die. And so the whole Jewish people petitioned me. They're asking me, when I was in Jerusalem, when I was here and talking about the last trial, what were they asking at the last trial? Same thing, that Paul needs to die. Shouting that he ought not to live any longer, but I found that he had done nothing deserving of death. Now, imagine, he's basically the judge, right? The tribune. He would sit on the throne. He is the one making a judgment. He is telling the courtroom, the audience hall, he's telling everyone, before the trial even starts, before we hear anything, he says, that I found that he had done nothing deserving of death. What if you were sitting in a courtroom today, and before the judge gavels court into order, he says to the jury, to everyone standing around, I don't think he's guilty, but let's see how it goes. What would we call that? Huh? Prejudice, that's right. We'd call a mistrial. The judge can't come in and say that. Or if he stood up and he said, now before we start, I want you to know, I've looked at the evidence and this man is as guilty as sin. Right? But let's see how it goes. That's a prejudice of the jury, of the trial. But here, that's what he says. Now, he is able to say that because, one, Paul has already been tried by Felix, and there was nothing found. And two, he's been tried already by Festus, and nothing has been found. So he is simply stating the facts, but I do think that he is leading the popular opinion that Paul does not deserve death, probably saving his life by doing so. As he himself appealed to the emperor, I decided to go ahead and send him, but I have nothing definite to write to my Lord about him. Right? So we're going to send a prisoner in transport to Caesar, and we would normally send the papers of accusation or charges against the man, so that whenever Caesar gets him, he can look at it and go over the charges and then do the trial, investigate the case. He said, I got nothing to write on the charge papers. There's nothing to charge him with. And so there's a difficulty there. Therefore, I have brought him before you all, especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after we have examined him, I may have something to write. He's appealed to Caesar. He's going. We don't have anything to write on the charge paper, so let's see if we can't find something. For it seems to me unreasonable in sending a prisoner not to indicate the charges against him. So he is setting the stage with the audience, setting the stage with Agrippa, setting the stage with Paul and the Jews who are accusing Paul. Everyone knows basically what is happening in this trial. So chapter 26 then becomes the actual trial. So Agrippa said to Paul, you have permission to speak for yourself. And then Paul stretched out his hand and made his defense. And I think I've pointed out how many times Luke, when Paul especially begins to speak, will say something about Paul's hands. Paul motioning to them. Or Paul beckoning with his hands. Why is that important? Why would Luke over and over mention the use of Paul's hands when he's speaking and when he's preaching?
His hands say something.
Okay.
They indicate he's trying to bring Luke closer, maybe.
Okay, so maybe he's trying to gather attention from the people, and he's beckoning them to come in. We talked about this, I think, last week at the beginning of the trial with Felix. You remember the Jews hired the Roman Tertullus, right? Do you remember what he was referred to as? What the text calls him? Depending on the translation, some say a lawyer or an attorney, right? And it's the word, in the Greek, it's the word rhetor, where we get rhetoric. A rhetor is one who uses rhetoric, right? Rhetoric was basically communication for persuasion. That's what it's persuasive. If you ever studied speech in high school or anything like that, and you had to give a persuasive speech, persuasive, right? That's the use of rhetoric. Aristotle was the philosopher who really defined that. And among all the things that he talks about in rhetoric, we mentioned the ethos and the pathos and the logos. That was the three key things. But the book's this thick, so obviously has a lot more in there. You know what else he talks about? Gestures, hand motions. Luke is telling us that Paul is no dummy. Paul knows what he's doing. Paul uses gestures. When you start to analyze his sermons, he uses the very patterns which Aristotle set in place hundreds of years before Paul. The peroration, the oration, the narration, all the different parts of a speech for persuasion. Paul nails it every time. He goes right through the list. He is educated, not just in the Jewish ways, but he was educated in the Greco-Roman ways for persuasive speech. And so I think that's one of the things that Luke is giving to us, is to show us that Paul knows what he's doing. And so when he motions, when he stretches out his hands to make his defense, he is using rhetorical gestures in order to help his case. I like that Paul uses whatever means are at his disposal at any given time, right? We've talked about him using his citizenship. Here he's using his Roman education. Of course, he's going to rely upon, I'm a Pharisee. I was raised the son of a Pharisee. He's going to rely upon his Jewish education, his Jewish part. He will use whatever means he can, right? So what does Paul write in 1 Corinthians 9? Around verse 23 or so. I became all things to all people, right? I used every means at my disposal, and we see that even here. So he says, I consider myself fortunate that it is before you, King Agrippa, that I'm going to make my defense today against all the accusations of the Jews. Some have looked at this and said, well, this is flattery. He's giving flattery to Agrippa. He doesn't really like Agrippa, but he is going to deign to his authority, to his position, and to what he can do. That may be true. I remember in one of my textbooks in communications, it talks about buffer statements. It's not necessarily flattery, but it's opening words whereby we try to connect with our audience, or we're trying to connect with the person we're speaking to or writing to. We might use buffer statements in a letter. It's that idea of agreeing with what you can agree with, and then let's get into the matter at hand. And so does Agrippa bring something else to the table that Felix and Festus did not? Yes. So can he honestly say that it's fortunate that he is before King Agrippa? I think so. Yes, it's not flattery, but it is this buffer statement that agrees with what we can agree with before we get into the matter at hand. Do you know who else used that tactic? Jesus, right? Think about the book of Revelation, chapter 2 and 3, when he writes the letters, to the church at Ephesus, right? And what does he always do in each of those letters, except for two, but in the ones that he can, he says, I know your works. I know the good things about you. Nevertheless, I have this against you. he's giving them a buffer statement. We're going to agree on the things that we can agree on, and then we're going to address some of the issues that we have. That's how Jesus did it. That's how Paul is doing it. He says, I'm glad that it's you that I get to make my defense today against all the accusations of the Jews, especially because you are familiar with all the customs and the controversies of the Jews. Now, mind you, Agrippa knows the Jews, and the Jews know Agrippa. Agrippa leads the Jews. He has authority here. The Jews don't like Agrippa, though. It's not like they like this man. He has made decisions for them that they didn't like, that have trickled down to them or directly affected them in some way. He is not considered a Jew by the Jews, even though there's some distant relationships there. He's not the kind of guy they want to follow. But he has that authority, so there's nothing they can do about it. So he is familiar with their customs and the controversies. I think Paul is pointing out, remember, these people don't like you. Therefore, I beg you to listen to me, notice, patiently. Patiently. There's probably going to be a lot of harumphing in the audience when Paul is giving his defense, maybe some interruptions in his testimony, certainly some groans from some of them. But Paul says, I want you to listen, but I don't just want you to listen, I want you to listen patiently. Patiently. That word indicates that Paul believes that Agrippa has the ability to listen patiently, and that he has a heart to listen patiently. And so he appeals to that side of Agrippa. Certainly that's, he is setting the stage, much like Festus was setting the stage. Paul is setting the stage for his testimony. So here he goes. My manner of life from my youth, spent from the beginning among my own nation in Jerusalem, is known by all the Jews. Now, it's interesting because he says, spent from the beginning among my own nation. Where was Paul born? Tarsus of Cilicia, which is not his own nation, right? It's not the Jewish nation. He was born a Roman citizen in a Roman province, and he appeals to that at times. But as was often the case, especially thinking about the fact that he was the son of a Pharisee, meaning his father was a Pharisee, the Pharisees were very closely connected to Jerusalem because of the temple. And it does not seem far-fetched to us that Paul, even as a boy, would have been sent to Jerusalem with his relatives in order to be trained in the temple school. So Paul makes reference to that. From my youth, spent from the beginning among my own nation and in Jerusalem, is known by all the Jews. Everyone knows where I came from, where I grew up. Remember when Jesus came back, what did they say about Jesus? Is this not the carpenter's son, whose brothers, James and Joseph, Judas, they're right here with us today, Simon, they're here with, they knew one another's family history, right? We've kind of gotten away from that in our modern culture, but there was a time where pretty much everyone knew everyone's business, right? I remember I was preaching in the church in Leonard, and the church owned a house that we lived in there, and there was a big tree in my neighbor yards, Mr. Atnep, but it was right there on the border, but it was in his yard. He took care of the tree, and one night a storm came. I mean, it was blowing hard, and I woke up and I heard this, and I woke Julie up and said, "Get up! That tree's falling! Because it was right over the corner of our bedroom, and sure enough, it fell. It fell and it hit the house. It didn't go through the roof, thankfully, and all that stuff. And that tree laid there 1 week, and 2 weeks, and 3 weeks, and 4 weeks. And Mr. Atnip was trying to find someone who could cut it up, and the church was trying to find some men who'd go out and cut it up, and we're trying to get it all taken care of. And I remember going through the bank, and the teller that I didn't know her name, She asked, when are they going to get that tree off your house? Everyone knew everyone's business. Of course, it was a town of less than 2,000 people, but everyone knew everybody's business. Paul says, everyone knew my business. I was, not just because, he was in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem's a small town. It may not have been quite that small, but Paul was going places among the Jewish people. His dad was a leader. He was expected to be a leader. He's being trained to be a leader. He says, these people know, everybody knows how, and he's saying how good a Jew I was. That's really what he's saying. Everyone knows how good of a Jew I was. I behaved myself. I did everything they should. They have known for a long time, if they are willing to testify. When they get up here to accuse me and give their testimony, let them talk about my days, my early days, and how they felt about me before I obeyed the gospel. Let them tell that story and be those accusers. So he says that according to the strictest party of our religion, the Pharisees, I have lived as a Pharisee. Now here's a question. Were the Pharisees really the strictest party of the Jews? Some might say the Zealots might have been more strict, because not only did they follow many of the very same strictures or scruples that the Pharisees had, but add to that their willingness to kill anyone who disagreed with them. that's zealous. The Sicaria, they're called that because the knives that they used were the Sicarii knife, but they would go among crowds and they would find people who were strangers and foreigners at times, and they would just, pull the knife out and kill them and stick their knife back in and keep going. They were known as assassins, but you might say that they had a very strict interpretation. But we get what Paul is saying here. Even the strictures of the Zealots were based upon the separatist attitude of the Pharisees. And so he says, I'm the strictest party of our religion. We didn't just follow the law, we made new laws to protect the laws from being broken. That was their attitude. The law says you can only go this far. We're going to say you can only go this far, so that you can't even, if you'll stop here, that means you can't break that law. And that was really the attitude of many of the Pharisees. Where did they get such strictures? It came from this idea that Moses wrote down the law, and then Moses spoke the traditions, and those traditions were passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation. So you had two means of authority. You had the written word, and you had the traditions of Moses, and that's how they understood and lived the law, was based upon both of those. Now, what's the problem of following oral traditions?
They can easily be misinterpreted and changed.
Absolutely. Have you ever played the telephone game where you start with one phrase here and you go down a line of 10 or 12 people and then they have to repeat the same phrase? And how often do they get the phrase right? They never do. Right? Because oral tradition tends to do that, especially over years and distance. Okay?
You have the idea of this is the way we've always done it, so we're going
Yeah.
to just multiply.
Yes. And this may not be the way we've always done it. It's the way we've done it as far back as I can remember. But before that, I have to rely on what Dad told me or Mom told me, and what if they didn't have every word right, so that I'm replicating the same thing? It becomes very tenuous to say, well, this is exactly what Moses told the people by the traditions, and we have received it. There's a certain amount of arrogance in that statement. But that's where the Pharisees were. And he says, I now stand here on trial because of my hope in the promise made by God to our fathers, to which our 12 tribes hope to attain as they earnestly worship night and day. And for this hope I am accused by the Jews, O king. Why is it thought incredible by any of you that God raises the dead? Right back to what he says, right? It's about for the resurrection. I stand here because of the resurrection. Right? He says, in fact, not only is it the resurrection I believe in, but guess what? The 12 tribes of Israel, all of Israel believe in the resurrection. They hope to attain to the resurrection. That's why they worship night and day. They follow God because they hope in the resurrection. So why is it considered so incredible that I say that God raises the dead? That's a pretty logical argument. It's hard to refute those ideas. I myself am convinced that I ought to do many things in opposing was convinced that I ought to do many things in opposing the name of Jesus of Nazareth. We get it. This is a particular attitude that sometimes we see today, and we find it rather repulsive. Is, yeah, I used to be like you, but I learned better. But that's kind of what Paul is saying, isn't it? He says, I myself, I was right there. Well, he's not saying I learned better. What he's saying is, look, I was right there with you. I was a Pharisee. I followed the Jewish ways, and I was convinced that I ought to do many things in opposing the name of Jesus. What'd you do? Well, so I did so in Jerusalem. I not only locked up many of the saints in prison after receiving authority from the chief priests, but when they were put to death, when those saints, when those Christians were put to death, I cast my vote against them. And immediately our minds are drawn back to the end of chapter 7, beginning of chapter 8. Stephen is stoned to death, and then chapter 8 opens with, and Paul consented to his death. All right, so I'm casting my vote. By the way, this statement here, casting my vote, has led some to believe that Paul not only was a Pharisee, but that Paul served on the Sanhedrin Council. Which brings up a question, because in order to serve on the Sanhedrin Council, you had to be married. And we know when Paul writes 1 Corinthians 7, he mentions, that he's not married. Is it possible Paul had been married prior and served on the Sanhedrin Council?
His wife could have died.
His wife could have died. They could have divorced. Is it possible that if Paul served on the Sanhedrin Council, he had to have been married? By the time he writes 1 Corinthians, he is not married. Whatever happened to his wife, we don't know. But that's a possibility. But that comes from this idea of I cast my vote. Well, does he mean he actually literally cast a vote, or does it simply mean he consented? Well, in chapter 8, it says he consented. Paul doesn't say here, I consented. He said, I cast my vote. So there is a difference there. I tend to think that Paul is using this more metaphorically and that he was not on the Sanhedrin Council, but it is certainly possible. I wouldn't fall out of fellowship with someone who said, well, Paul was married at one time. Okay. It seems a little tenuous, but it's possible. And certainly that gives us a little more weight to when Paul talks about family matters and husbands, how you treat your wife. By the way, that's our lesson tonight in Ephesians chapter 5 about the marriage relationship, love and respect, things like that. You'll want to be back for that. But it gives weight to Paul doing that if at one time he also had actually been married and struggled with some of the very things that he's talking about. So again, I wouldn't fall out of fellowship with someone. I certainly wouldn't make that a test of fellowship. But that is a pretty forceful statement. I cast my vote. Maybe even more than just giving consent, he cast a vote if he were on the Sanhedrin Council. I punished them often in the synagogues and tried to make them blaspheme. And now my mind goes to the detective shows, and you've got the perpetrator, the accused, in the little interrogation room, and Paul's standing over and going, "What did you do? Did you blaspheme?" He said, I'm trying to trip them up. I'm trying to get them to blaspheme God. Well, what could they possibly say that would blaspheme?
Jesus wasn't the Savior. He wasn't resurrected. He wasn't God.
Yeah. Or what he's trying to get them to admit is that Jesus is God. Because if they will admit that, they've blasphemed, see. As a Jew, he wants them to admit that they believe Jesus is God. That Jesus is king. Oh, insurrection. Nope, Caesar, he's coming after you. They said Jesus is a king, so he's coming after you. See, that's what they're trying to do. Oh, look, he called his wife his sister. Incest! By the way, those were the most common accusations against Christians in the 1st and 2nd century. Incest, atheism, insurrection, and cannibalism. Those were the main accusations. If you didn't understand what they're talking about in their own language, you might believe that were true. Scott?
Just briefly on that idea of him being on the Sanhedrin, it seems to me, as he's making this defense, and he's talking about all his things about his former life, if he had been on the Sanhedrin, he would have said, I even served on the council.
Absolutely. I was one of you. Remember, most of these are from the council themselves. He could have said, I've served with you. I cast my vote right alongside you. So there are more forceful ways he could have said it, more clear ways. That's another reason why I think that it's probably not on the council. But again, it's an interesting thing to think about anyway. But he says, I tried to make them blaspheme. I tried to trip them up myself. And in raging fury against them, I persecuted them even to foreign cities. Paul's saying, look, this bloodlust you have against me right now, that's the same bloodlust I had against the Christians before. I know where you're coming from. I know how you feel. That's what he's telling them. In this connection, he says, I journeyed to Damascus. These are the foreign cities. With the authority and the commission of the chief priest. Look, if he has the authority and the commission of the chief priest, it means that at one time he was in the good graces of the very same chief priests that are here accusing him now. I wonder if he kept the document. Here are the letters signed by this guy right here that I'm a good guy and that I'm here to... He had proof. I don't know that he kept that letter, but it'd be kind of funny if he did. Right? Here it is. These are the very letters that they sent me. At midday, O king, I saw on the way a light from heaven, brighter than the sun that shone around me and those who journeyed with me. And when we had all fallen to the ground, this light was so bright, it was so mesmerizing, it stopped all of us in our tracks, right? If you live out in the country and you have the 2 million power candle, flashlight, and you go spotlighting. Some of you that may not know what that is, but you shine the bright light on a wild animal, a hog or a deer, and they'll stop. It's mesmerizing in that moment. Now, what you do after that is up to you. I'm not going to accuse you of doing anything. I'm just saying, you can spotlight stopping. That's Paul and his companions are stopped in their tracks by this light from heaven. And when they had all fallen to the ground, I heard a voice saying to me in the Hebrew language, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the pricks. And I said, who are you, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But rise and stand up on your feet, for I have appeared to you for this purpose, to appoint you as a servant and a witness to these things, or to the things which you have seen me, and to those in which I will appear to you, delivering you from the people and from the Gentiles to whom I am sending you, to open their eyes so that they may turn from darkness to light, from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. And so this is another account of Paul's conversion, very, very similar to what happened. We read about in chapter 9, what he said in chapter 22. We're seeing it here again in chapter 26. He's giving the impetus. And notice the contrast. I had commission from the chief priest. Now I have commission from the Lord. That's the point he is making. And this commission is so that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified. That's what he wants them to have. Now, Agrippa knows the Jews. He knows their ways, their customs, their controversies. He knows their attitude towards sin. And he's thinking, why would they be angry at this Paul who's giving them the opportunity for the forgiveness of sins? How could they be angry at him for teaching the resurrection which they believe in? All right? Agrippa's not an idiot. He's putting it together. Therefore, King Agrippa, I was not disobedient to the heavenly vision. Listen, you have a vision like that, you obey that rather than what people think you ought to do, right? If you have a heavenly vision, I wasn't about to disobey it, but declared first to those in Damascus, then in Jerusalem, and throughout all the region of Judea, and also to the Gentiles, that they should repent and turn to God. I began preaching the very words which he spoke, performing deeds in keeping with their repentance. What did John say in Matthew 3? Bring forth fruits worthy of repentance. It's a common theme. Perform deeds. Those are the fruits in keeping with repentance. For this reason, the Jews seized me in the temple and they tried to kill me. And to this day, I have had the help that comes from God. And so I stand here testifying both to small and great, saying nothing but what the prophets and Moses said would come to pass, that Christ must suffer, and that by being the first to rise from the dead, he would proclaim light both to our people and to the Gentiles. He says, look, God's providence has kept me alive to this moment so I can keep telling people about Christ's death, his resurrection, and the opportunity for all to be saved. Both to our people and to the Gentiles. This salvation from Christ is to all people, including you, Agrippa. Agrippa would be in that second, to the Gentiles. He'll be in that second group, but how did the Jews feel about Agrippa? They didn't like him because he wasn't a Jew. He says, look, I'm bringing salvation to the Jew and to the Gentile. Well, that would appeal to someone like Agrippa, who is hated by the Jews. But he also says, I'm simply saying what the prophets and Moses said would come to pass. I'm not making stuff up. This is not something they have never heard. In fact, these are the very things that they are anticipating would happen. And as he was saying these things in his defense, Festus, with a loud voice, Paul, you are out of your mind. Your great learning is driving you out of your mind. You're crazy. You're talking like a madman, in some translations. But Paul said, I'm not out of my mind, most excellent Festus. I'm speaking true and rational words. I've made a perfect argument, a rational, logical argument. For the king knows about these things. He knows about the teaching of the Jews. He knows about what Moses and the prophets have said. He may not know every in and out. He's not a scholar, but he's certainly familiar with the Old Testament word. The king knows about these things, and to him I speak boldly. I will call these things out because he knows them. For I am persuaded that none of these things has escaped his notice, for this has not been done in a corner. If all of these things happened and Agrippa didn't know about it, that meant Agrippa was an idiot. He's saying Agrippa's not an idiot. He's seen all these things. He knows all these things. He's heard these things. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know that you believe. We call this the invitation. He looks at King Agrippa. He says, look, I know who you are. I know what you believe. Do you believe the prophets? This is what the prophets said would happen. I mean, he's making it personal for King Agrippa. And Agrippa said to Paul, in a short time, would you persuade me to be a Christian? Felix said, another time. Festus said, you want to go to another place? Agrippa says, do you think you can do it in this quick amount of time, a short time? Paul says, whether short or long, I would to God that not only you, but also all who hear me this day might become as I am, except for the chains. I'm not asking that you go to prison and be in chains, but I want you to be a Christian. I want you to be saved. And we see this attitude of compassion that he has for Agrippa and that he has for everyone who is sitting there that day. And ends up, they arose, the governor and Bernice and those who were sitting with them. And when they had withdrawn, they said to one another, this man is doing nothing deserving of death or imprisonment. And Agrippa said to Festus, this man could have been set free if he had not appealed to Caesar. But if he had not appealed to Caesar, he may have been dead by now. this is how God keeps him alive for all of this. It's a great story, but Felix, Festus, and Agrippa, they each heard the same word. They each had a different response. But none of them accepted the truth of the resurrection. So there you go. I appreciate your attention. We'll pick up on 27. We've got 2 weeks to the end of the quarter. We have 2 chapters. Hey, it's almost like it's going to work out, so we'll see. Chapter 27 next week. Yes.
Precious cornerstone, sure